everyone. Welcome to Resourceful Humans. I'm your host, Corey Haber, and today I have with you Junaid and Nancy. They're going to talk with us about office politics, especially office politics in our remote environment now in the workplace. And things have definitely changed from what office politics used to be like with pre-pandemic when you're going into the office day to day. So thank you so much, you two, for coming on. I know you're both very busy, so I'm very honored that you could put aside the time.
Look, I'm honored to be. Yeah, I'm honored to be here, and I always make time for podcasts.
Oh, good.
Me too.
Well, let's jump into it because I know we have a lot to touch on, and you guys have a lot of information to offer in this area. But before we start, I really think it would be helpful to our viewers to just kind of hear how you define office politics, and then what you feel like is what most people define as office politics.
I'll let Nancy go first.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I will say that most people define office politics as this vicious stabbing in the back sort of episode of, Survivor, where who gets voted off the island. And I think that's a real confusion or conflation of politics with partisanship or conquest. To me, office politics are simply the result of competing for limited resources in an organization. And resources are always limited, be it money, be it promotion, be it headcount, be it the conference room or the virtual room. So politics is just a natural byproduct. And, the point to sort of bolster that is think of your own family. I think most families have their own politics, whether or not you're at the Thanksgiving dinner table. So I really define it as a very natural outcome that is unfortunately misunderstood, misdefined, and terribly mishandled.
Yeah. So I think office politics, it's a neutral word, but just how it's often perceived, it does have a very negative connotation because there's both the pros and the cons, right? There are some office politics where it's like, hey, you do your work, you get the stuff done, and you're rewarded. Now, the other aspect, the negative side that a lot of people deal with is like when it comes to the dynamics. A lot of personalities really impact office politics. So you have dealing with certain personalities. Oh, this person likes this person likes that. So it's really, so adding on to Nancy's answer is to bring up the layers of the personality dynamic that really impact decision-making and that influence decision-making.
I think you're right. I think for a lot of people, it has a negative connotation. And it doesn't have to. So, I mean, you both mentioned kind of how you see office politics, and so you feel like most people, for the definition for them is it's more of a negative thought.
Yeah, especially when people get fired over office politics, when there's favoritism that impacts their careers. For me personally, there was a small amount of office. I remember one of my previous jobs I had, my manager left because his boss was changed, and he always had an issue with that boss because he wasn't respected. So he left as a result, and that was the negative part of office politics, where you're sort of forced to do things. But I will say that there's also good. Like, for example, my worker and we have a very good relationship, and we're very transparent. So it could go both ways, but it really comes down to leadership for really setting that culture and that environment.
You mean for your company? Your partner?
For my company, just my business partners, we have good office politics. But, I learned from kind of seeing what the negatives of office politics were.
Well, and I would say from my point of view, I've worked so long with leaders in your teams within organizations. And the people who got kind of stalled in their tracks or left a job, as Junaid was saying, or teams that kind of plateaued, it was never expertise. It wasn't even goodness of intent. It was something political. And I'm sort of trying to move off the idea that a person is political, to take a look at the structures within organizations, the incentive structures, the recognition structures, the resource structures, because you'll always have office politics. It's just a matter of dialing it down so it doesn't interfere with the business and with people's lives.
That's true. And so speaking of negative negative experiences. I'd really love to hear some more examples of negative experiences the two of you have encountered when it comes to office politics. If you have some good examples or stories you can share.
I
Sure,
mean,
I've lost.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, Nancy, you
All right.
jumped on that. That's yours.
I mean, this is my wheelhouse, you know. I mean, I have a validated model. I've been a coach for 21 years. I was quoted in lots of places about it. Yeah, I mean, my negative experiences are really how I came up with my fascination and focus on this stuff, being fired twice. That's my negative experience. And in both cases, it was because I didn't read the tea leaves. You know, once it was because I had a very different understanding of what I thought my boss should want versus what my boss truly valued, which I didn't respect. And that lack of respect probably was part of what got me fired. You know, I thought my job was to apprise her of risk, that was really important. She thought my job was loyalty. And
Oh,
that's a big disconnect.
it
The
is.
second time I lost a job, it is, I know. Well, but,
Yeah.
you know, in a sense, shame on me, right? That I really couldn't put myself aside to read the chessboard, as I like to say. The second time was also getting fired because I thought I was in charge of hiring consultants who I thought reported to me. But I didn't know they played golf with the CEO. So when I said, no, we shouldn't go with these guys, they had typos in their proposal. They cut me out of meetings. You know, I don't want to hire them. I want to hire the other firm. I was overruled, and which undercut my authority. I didn't understand what the power in that organization really was. So those were my negative experiences,
Mm.
Yeah,
or
I
at
mean,
least two of them. I'm
yeah,
sure there were
I
more.
mean, one that sticks out and it has like a big impact close to my heart. I used to do a lot of like career fairs for an older company, and I actually don't even list the company on my LinkedIn profile because I get a lot of LinkedIn profile views, and I don't want that company getting any more views than they have to. To that's how I feel.
Right, right.
Um, and I had a friend who was, so I used to be an actuary, so he had like a 2.9 GPA, and unfortunately, it's a very competitive field. If you have under 3.0, it's very hard to get in. But he passed the two exams, so it's not like he didn't have the ability. The exams are like the most important thing. So I used to do a lot of career fairs, and So the thing is, most people hate being the representative at a career fair because you literally have 50 of the same conversations the whole day. But for me, it's like I could do that. I could do that all day because I know how it was as job seekers.
What
And
I
actuaries are not the most sociable people, right?
I'll
So
say,
they hated it. They absolutely hated it. For me, it's like I could go all day, and I did several of them, and it was never like I got paid for it. It's just something like I like helping out, and so it's not like I needed him to get a job or anything. I personally met the person who was in charge of the program, and I handed her his resume. And look, if he failed the interview, that would be on him. But whatever, give the guy a shot. And then he didn't get it, and then I found out that someone else he had two exams at the time. Someone else got the internship with no exams, and then it kind of sucks and unfortunately that was like his final shot at like getting something, and unfortunately he went crazy. He legitimately went mentally like schizophrenic, and it's something that
wow,
it was like the one shot, like had he got it, you kind of. So that was for me office pot one example, and the other one was where we would have to do time tracking for our work, like how many hours and I understood why they did it, to figure out where we're spending our time. But the fact was everybody was lying. Like every week everybody was working like 40 to 50 hours and while taking a lunch, and it doesn't matter, the busiest week was like 45 hours, the lightest week was like 40 hours, and it was like, what's the point of doing this if it wasn't accurate? And my manager was like, look, this is a waste of time. If you want me to tell you, I can tell you. But he was like, no, we need to do this time tracking report. It's like, what's the point of a report if it's erroneous? And it always caused big issue. And then people just fill it out at the end of the week, like, oh yeah, I did this. So it was sort of useless, but the person loved it. And unfortunately, that person was a VP. And so when he just didn't really respect other opinions, and as a leader, you kind of have to think about, look, why are we doing this, and what's the point? If the point is just to fill out a sheet that's not accurate to send to someone else who barely looks at it, it's just such a waste of time. So that was like my two biggest experiences with office politics. And then I took it as part of my own company. It's like I never wanted to be someone who didn't really respect my employees, right? Like even though I'm whatever the highest in my company, I say my assistant, she's my manager, right? She stays on top of me, and I'll always ask her, be like, hey, are you liking the work you're doing? And I'm treating her like I can't lose her because I would hate to lose her.
Right.
And I think that's like a big thing. It's like it really helped me understand like how to really value your employees.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hold the phone. Hold the phone. You're an actuary?
I used to be an actuary.
Okay, I know actuaries because I used to work in a big
Yeah.
insurance company. And when you say they're not known for their social skills, I think you were, how can I put it, softballing that statement. Okay, they do not look, sound, walk, or talk like you. So, I wish you, in a weird, twisted way, I kind of wish you had stayed and been like a role model because
Nah.
actuaries, I mean, okay, do you know, I have to tell this joke. Do you know
Yeah.
the difference between an introvert and introverted and an extroverted actuary? Have you heard this joke?
No.
No. I mean, no. I haven't heard it.
They're actually, it's pretty sad. This may be the only joke about actuaries. So, and an introverted actuary, when he or she, typically he is talking to you, they look at their
Yeah.
shoes.
Yeah.
When an
Oh,
extroverted actuary is talking to you, he looks at your shoes.
Yeah. I've heard that. I totally. Yeah. That's a. No, I
Totally
mean,
true. Sorry, Corey.
I
yeah.
haven't
No,
heard that.
nothing wrong with
That's
that.
funny.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, it's just another thing. That's sort of why I left the corporate area. It's just in terms of politics. Oh yeah, the other thing, my personal thing. Like I was always late to work every day. I'm not a morning person, and I have actually have a condition. I have a shifted circadian rhythm, but it's something that no one takes seriously. It's like, oh yeah, I wake up early for work. Why don't you? It's like, well, I can work fine at 2 a.m. Why don't you? It's like a different thing. And a lot of people just focus on, hey, I do things this way. But the fact is, there's so many personalities, and if you don't have conversations with people, because it's like, look, I passed my actuarial exams. I went to an Ivy League. I did all that. It's not a lack of work ethic. It's just I'm literally not a morning person. So that was another thing for office politics. I remember one day walking in on my chair, and the she was a good manager. It's just she just didn't understand. She's like, hey, your work hours are from 9 to 5, 5:30 with a 1 hour lunch, and please. But for me, it's like my work wasn't dependent on coming in at 9. It's not like I'm opening up a store or I have to produce a report at 10 a.m. every day. And even if I had to, I'd probably do it the night before. I'd find ways to make it work. But unfortunately, it's when I find a lot of office politics. It's when you focus so much on the process and not the results.
Right. Oh, I
I
totally.
want to, I'd like to push back on that just a little bit,
Yeah.
right? As something I don't really consider political, because we can call everything political.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, of course.
right. So I'm somewhat empathetic to the
Yeah,
fact that to make an organization run, right,
yeah,
you have to have some kind of sort of standards
yeah.
of the game
I agree.
because you need people to work with each other,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need to have meetings, right? And so, I mean, now I think we're evolving because we needed to ways where work is flexing in some ways. But the larger, I used to, by the way, and I had the same pushback with my company because I had a young child, I was a single mom, I had a 90-minute commute. I could not get in before 9:30. I just physically couldn't do it, and I had to leave at like 5:15 on the dot. And I was an officer. It didn't matter if I was on my then BlackBerry at 10 o'clock at night or 5 a.m. There's something about FaceTime. So I kind of resented it because I felt that in my life circumstances I had no choice.
Right.
But on the other hand, if someone, maybe I'm just like putting myself above everyone else in a way, but I kind of get it because it is really hard to manage a group of people
yeah,
if everyone is coming in at a different time and leaving at a different time. It kind of is like it gunks up the works. So
yeah.
I don't like the rigidity of it. I'm with you totally on that. And I think what most people want in work life is more flexibility, but I get the reasoning for
Yeah,
it.
no,
So
I get the
that's
reasoning.
not
I just think,
Yeah.
political. That's kind of
yeah,
business. You just
yeah,
said
no,
what
you're
I
right.
get.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I guess it's not political. It's just how organizations are structured. Yeah, it just gave me, and that's why I really pride my company on flexibility. And that's kind of what. Look, I understand there are pros and cons to everything, but they pay for an employee turnover. Simple as that. You pay
Damn
one way or
straight.
another.
Hey, you always pay. And by the way, it's not an accident that I've been out of corporate life for 13 years. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
There is no way I would go back because I do think there's such a suppression of talent and voice in favor of process.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question for the two of you. So, just in my opinion, I feel like a lot of times the negative office politics situations come from a disconnect, like you mentioned, Nancy, or just a lack of someone understanding what their responsibilities are or what's expected of them. Do you feel like that's the case? Or if so, how does someone avoid that or prevent that from happening?
I would say it really stems from the top, and you really have to have the conversations with everyone because people have like a weekly team meeting and all that, and again, it's an organizational issue that you put so much meetings on these officers. Like I see officers and it's like meeting. Hey, I have like 10 minutes between if this meeting finishes early. And they literally don't have time to manage. And then since they don't have time to manage, their people under them don't grow at the same rate. So it's just like I'm of the theory that you got to make sure that you never fill up your people's calendars, because if you fill up your people's calendar, if an emergency comes up, now they have to push these 10 things away. And that's why people have these things that they never get to, just because they have so much on their plate. So
Right.
You really have to set the time to have these conversations, because what happens is this person leaves and you have no idea. You have no idea that they're not being respected. And the fact is, now you're rushing to hire. Everything ends up being rushed. Whereas like, you don't have to do everything. But the things you do, you have to do them well. Like you don't have to, like hiring, if you do it well, you just fix so many issues. If you get these one-on-ones at regular times, because most of the time you get like a quarterly review. It's like, so you got to wait 3 months to get
quarterly. That's a very forward-thinking company.
Yeah, and that's a forward-thinking company. Most of the time it's annual review. It's like so much changes in a year. The market changes in a year. So many, your goals may change in the year. So it's like, I think I read a book. There's a book that talks about how yearly goals are not that good. You're better off setting goals every 3 months, because what happens is it's shorter. It's more, you make smaller goals, and then you can see, okay, hey, did I do it? I said I was going to lose 5 pounds. Did I do it? Oh no, I lost 10 pounds. So now you can figure out. Whereas like a year,
I could go eat.
Yeah. Whereas like a year passes and it just literally ends up being too long that you forget about your goals and all that. So I'm a big fan of like, I guess, mini goals and many things. And same thing as an organization, it's just so many things happen within a year that you need to have these conversations more often.
Corey, I would say the answer to your question is the answer any consultant would give you, which is it depends. I do love the expression. I think it may originally come from the mafia. I'm not quite sure, but it's that a fish rots from the head. So if you don't know what your responsibilities are, there's a lack of clarity. Yes, it could be because you have an incompetent manager, frankly, or you have an inarticulate leader, or you have a manager who focuses all of his or her time on managing up versus being a developmental manager. On the other hand, it could be because you haven't asked the questions. You don't feel psychologically safe to ask questions. You don't know the right questions to ask. You have different priorities. You have a certain way of thinking how your job should work, right? So I don't think it's always clear cut what's going on. Is that political? Again, I think my definition might be a little bit more narrow, because I think of political intelligence, at least, is building alliances, pursuing results, overcoming obstacles, and reading the chessboard. And behind those things are very specific behaviors that are more positive versus negative. I mean, information sharing or hoarding is a big one, where I've seen teams absolutely crumble. And so is that a political act? Not intentionally, but it's politically dysfunctional. And I think that poor, absent management can absolutely create a dysfunctional political atmosphere.
You can. I was thinking the other day, if you had a manager and their employee sit down and write down, if the employee had to write down what their responsibilities are, or they believe their responsibilities are, and the manager had to write down what they believe that employee's responsibilities are, I feel like in most cases it would not match up. It would not. And I think that's a display of how good the management is or isn't, because they should match up. Everyone should understand what each person is responsible for.
That's typically the manager's, well, it's not just the manager's responsibility, but when that isn't clear, I think 8 times out of 10, it's the manager.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so you told us about a lot of negative experiences, which I think some people can relate to. Do you feel like those have contributed to kind of where you two are today, or why you do what you do now versus what you used to do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it definitely impacted a lot. That's why it's like I pride myself on flexibility. Like I actually like I always ask like, hey, are you happy with the work I'm giving you? Is this what you want to do? What do you want to do in the future? Because as a startup, there are many things I can do in the future, and it doesn't matter if I do X, Y, Z. It's still going to help grow my company. So with the employees I have, and I know how what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, I rather focus on their strengths and maybe like I just want to make sure that they're doing work that they see themselves doing because you pay your employees in more than just the money you give them. You pay them in, you know, the enjoyment, the flexibility, and it's an actual relationship. And look, they may not stick around forever, but I know that they'll refer good people to me because you look at all these top companies and, you know, people talk about, you know, they leave, but what do people put next to their name? Ex Google, ex Facebook, ex that. So then what does that mean? That means Google is still getting, someone's thinking about Google, someone's thinking about Facebook. So you want to be, because your previous employees are your best marketers, whether you realize it or not. And, you know, they're going to tell so. Because who do you ask when you're working at a company? You ask for your friend who worked there. Hey, what do you have to say about this company? And that's something that they can either say good things or bad things. And you can control that. So it's like treat someone well. So they're like, wow, I'm going to send the best person to them because this person took care of me. So that really impacted. And then also it's like, I've just, you know, I kind of saw like how in certain ways where it helped me and where it didn't help me. So I took the good and I was like, look, this is what I can do good, but hey, this is what I shouldn't do. And, you know, I catch myself trying to figure out it's an ongoing process, right? I don't have it perfect and I'm, you know, doing the best I can.
Well, it informs everything I do, Corey. It's the basis of all my work, especially over the last 2.5 years. You know, my team and I figured out a way to measure it, to create a model, organizational assessment around it. Every good leader I know will admit it. I did a webinar for SHRM that I think you were part of.
Yes, I was a part of it. Yeah.
That's how we met. And, you
Yes.
know, when I took a poll, have you ever worked for an organization that wasn't political? 96% of that audience said, no, I have never done that. You know, so I'm on a mission to strip away the evil in the word manipulative, in the word political, to not just help people navigate those challenges that they will always run into, you will always run into, but actually to have organizations acknowledge that emotion, EQ, is only 30 years old. The brilliance of EQ was marrying the word emotional with the word intelligence. Those words never went together before. And EQ is wonderful, but it has a really hard stop, which is understanding myself and understanding you. It does nothing to address the business impact of the space between us. And so it informs, honestly, everything I do. In that when I see teams miss their milestones on a roadmap, it was because of information hoarding. It was because of conflicting priorities. It was a lack of alliance around a common deliverable. And the impact of gossip. So the accepted messages from on top, nobody believes them anyway. So it's once you know what it is like once you have a hammer, everything's a nail. Once you have a framework, you see it everywhere. So I don't want people to fail, good people to fail. I want them to reach their full potential. So I'd say it's kind of woven into me now. I even have a son who's like a professional political operative. So
Oh,
it's
really?
real. It's oh yeah, he's a camp. Hello, Malcolm. Yeah, he's on his running his third. He's his third campaign he's managing.
Wow.
Wow, nice.
So it's really
Yeah.
woven into your lifestyle now.
Oh, I no getting away from it.
So what are some positive experiences then that you've had? That or
No,
no,
I'm just joking.
with the office.
Yeah, never. No, well,
Okay.
actually, I mean, I've had a lot of positive experiences. I think actually having this, I've done a lot of research on it. I think having this sort of intellectual capital and this experiential learning over the last 20 years, I bring enormous insight and shortcuts to my clients that once they can sort of accept it and lose a sort of instinctual blah, about it, has impacted so many people and careers. And for myself, I formed strategic alliances. It's made me more patient. It's made me less judgmental. It's made me more open to pulling back and listening. And so I have lots of relationships now I never would have had before. And that is from a certain kind of political savvy, and being able to pull back from the personality and listen to the idea. Because I think it's personality that often gets us
Right.
into trouble. That's a very emotional reaction.
That's true.
I mean, for me, I guess the positive side is I made relationships with a lot of people in the office, and like it put me in a good position that if I ever wanted to get hired back at some of the companies, I can get referrals. And I still like, just a lot of people really forget that just because you leave a place doesn't mean you can't come back. I see a lot of people go back to their old companies and they go back with higher salaries. So that's another thing that just navigating that, just building relationships with people and understanding like how to help them is really important, because I think that's how you add value to an organization, right? Because information hoarding is a big thing, and sometimes it's not intentional. It's just you're the guy responsible for this, and you only communicate through email, and no one really asks you questions. Like one thing that I would always do is I would ask them questions about their work. I would ask them questions about what they need help with, and then I find out, oh, this other guy has that report that they already do it. So why are you spending 2 hours doing it? Just get this report and change the formatting and you're done in 5 minutes. So that's like the other aspect of politics, is like when you really get to understand the issues people face and the struggles and what they need to get done, and you help people get those things done, they'll really remember you. And then you just make things better for the future. And then you make other people connect. And I think that's what a lot of people, like I've always been a connector. So that's like, I utilize that as my strength. And it just allows me just to learn about like what I wanted to do in the future, or just learning where organizations sort of have these gaps, because regardless, you're always going to have gaps in large organizations. It's just what happens with size.
I think the most positive political action anyone can take within an organization is understanding resistance. Because as Junaid said, people don't speak to one another. And when somebody resists what you want them to do, you just assume that they're resistant, like they're a problem. You never try to find out by asking good questions and actually listening. There's a reason for their resistance. That makes a lot of sense to them. And if you can just pull back from yourself and speak with them, you're going to learn something and you're going to make an alliance. And that's really smart stuff to do.
And that's not done enough, I don't believe. I feel like a lot of times when I speak to people, employees or managers, the majority of their conversations that they have with management are very structured. They're reviews. They don't get to have a lot of just conversation time to talk about how they feel or what they enjoy doing, what they don't enjoy doing. Like you mentioned, Junaid, it's, a lot of management, they book themselves where they have no time to talk to their employees or manage at all. And it really impacts how comfortable I think your employees feel, whether they can come to you or ask you questions too. So it does, I think, contributes to the office politics. So, I mean, I like the positive spins. I'd kind of like to hear if you have examples of just positive office politics situations that you've heard recently from people in this remote environment, because I know it's very different in the remote environment versus in an office. A hard question.
Well, mine is non-remote, but I did a resume for someone and he got a job at like a big company. Well, I'll mention it, Tesla, right? So
Yeah.
office politics actually helped him. So he was like a solar roofer. And after 7 months, he saw a project manager position. And office politics, he was known as the guy that you could depend on. He was like a natural lead. And I said, hey, look, when you're applying for this project manager position, ask your manager? And he's like, hey, my manager has my back and my support. My manager told me that he would apply and give me the recommendation. So I said, why don't you go directly to the guy and hand in? And office politics helped him get the promotion. So that's the other aspect. And, he deserved it. He worked hard and people were happy for him. So that's like a positive aspect. I think remote wise, it's like, I'll kind of talk about myself. It's like we sort of use Slack, we sort of use these, and I host virtual events for companies. So that I use that virtual event platform to sort of, we're doing a comedy show, and the people who work for us get to do it come for free. So it's kind of like that, where it's like, hey, like this team gathering thing. Sometimes I think a lot of people are getting, it's different. Some people are getting more free time, or they're getting enough flexibility that they can do things or have conversations with people they normally could not have gotten conversations with, because in the office, unfortunately, a lot of office, you have to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
But in the remote environment, if you're getting your work done and you're getting it done a certain way and people are happy, you actually have some flexibility to do a lot of things. So I'm seeing a lot of people connect deeply, and it's really helped a lot of introverts, I think, like this environment, because a lot of people think like introverts don't like interaction. It's just they don't like overstimulation, right? They don't like too much stimulation. So if they can get their work done in a certain environment, they prefer like the phone calls and connecting with people. So I think that's what you're seeing, is like some people are actually connecting even deeper than before, because they can control they have a lot more control, right? Now, before in an office, if someone comes by your cube and you don't want them to, it's a little harder to say, hey man, I'm busy. Not everybody is comfortable enough to say that, right? It's a skill to develop, and
most people
that's
aren't.
good. Yeah, most people just kind of, yeah. No, I mean, I am, but for me, it's also like I like talking to people. So for me, it's harder for me to say.
I would say yes, but meaning the people I tend to work with are in mid-sized or large companies. And the answer to your question, Corey, is no. I actually don't have a lot of positive stories because people don't know where decisions are being made. And the sort of serendipity of information you pick up by, even if someone you don't like is stopping by, your desk and open plan or over coffee, all that informal information that threads through an organization isn't there because everything is scheduled now. And although I have made fabulous deep connections, I run a small consulting firm and I'm always doing business development. And so it leads me to make interesting connections. But if you still have the same job you had before, the boundaries between, home and work are gone. You don't have a commute as a connective tissue or as a pain in the neck, but you don't know how decisions are being made as much. And I'll just come back to that. What skills are going to be more valued next year? People in New York, my clients are saying they don't expect to go back to their office till next summer. I mean, I was in an office for the first time this last week. I thought I had been cast in a post-apocalyptic zombie movie. It was Midtown. It was so friggin' weird.
Oh.
So I do think that this has torn at the fabric and that people are feeling they're sort of on their own. So I don't have positive political stories because I think there's a lack of information. And there's no easy way to replace that in the way we're working right now. I know that there will always be office politics because there are always politics. I just don't know, frankly, what they're going to look like.
I don't think a lot of people do. We don't have a lot of ideas on how things will look after this pandemic.
No one knows.
Yeah.
Anyone who says they do, they're just making it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, how could anybody know? It's like knowing when the pandemic's going to end.
They might have a crystal ball at home that tells them.
Yeah, I retired my crystal ball in 2016. I
You're
decided
smart.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my crystal ball clearly wasn't, right? So I just decided, forget that. So, yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. I remember seeing posts months ago, hey, everything's going to get better in 2 weeks. And that was like 4 months ago. And it's just kind of sad that you have, and, it was like a CEO of like some bank, not a crazy big bank, but a local bank. And it's like, how are you a leader and your decisions, you got to be honest. Like some leaders have to say like, look, I don't know when things are going to get better because nobody knows. And tell me how many people predicted it, and why are you listening to these people whose predictions were wrong 2 months ago? It's not like the predictions are going to be any more right than they were 3-4 months ago.
It's like a game. But
Yeah.
I have my own podcast, Political IQ, and this week's episode is a guy called Ravin Jesuthasan, who works for like the World Economic Forum at
Yeah.
Davos, and he's the head of global talent practice at Towers Watson. He's a really smart guy. And he was talking about the future of AI, and how we're going to really need to focus on the future of humans.
Yeah.
And it's really about work. What does work look like going forward? So I put in a little plug for myself, I know, but
Okay.
there's a lot of big brains. I mean, look at the difference between Amazon, for example, and Facebook. I mean, in just predicting the future of work. So Amazon bought the Lord and Taylor building in Manhattan for
I didn't
offices.
know that.
Which, well, yeah, and ironically, it was supposed to be the headquarters of WeWork. So somehow there's a
Wow.
beautiful poetry in that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Where Facebook is basically saying, hey, we can hire talent anywhere. We don't have to hire talent in Silicon Valley and pay those high salaries. We're pegging salaries to location of the person. Well, what's that going to do to cities? But meanwhile, Amazon's buying like this huge building for offices. So do you want to put your money on Zuckerberg or Bezos? Who do you think's smarter? I mean, I have my opinion, but I don't know.
That's true. We don't know.
Bezos.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So the last question I want to ask you, which I've actually it's been asked, or I know a lot of people that are curious, is what's a healthy amount of office politics?
I would say a healthy amount of office politics is when you take into consider the needs of the organization and the needs of the people, and trying to find a healthy balance between the two, so that and I think it's the right balance where it actually maximizes the results of the individuals and the organization. Because if you give an employee the tools that they need to succeed, and you figure out how to do it within the organization, you're going to see a lot of good results. And I've seen it all the time where it's like happy employees, they say like employees that are engaged are like 4.6 times less likely to leave, higher productivity.
Yeah.
And if it's higher productivity, it's like, the organization benefits. And when the organization benefits, they have more resources to give back to the employees. So it's just like a positive feedback cycle. So I think that's like a healthy amount where you don't just think about the needs of like a few people who control the organization. You think about the needs of everyone.
Well, it's hard to top that. I would just say that when women and people of color and LGBTQ people believe that the game is not rigged against them,
Yeah.
that they understand how organizations work, they are able to be smart about that, and that organizations recognize that this is a reality and that everyone deserves to be able to rise to their full potential. And how do they, as organizations, get out of those people's way so that, as Junaid said, the individual benefits, but so does the business. So there's no measurement, but since I can measure it, there's probably a magic number. But those are the things I would evaluate it against.
Yeah, no, and I think to add on to that, when you think about women, minorities, and just anybody who's not, it's like you want people to not realize their own race in situations. Like when you're with your friends and you're with people you're comfortable, you don't think like I'm a woman, right? You're just with your friends. Because the worst thing in any organization is when people recognize like, oh, I'm a woman, I got to approach this situation differently. I'm X race, I got to approach this situation differently. Because it's like when people think like, okay, I didn't get the position because, it's fair, this person deserved it. But when people start questioning, again, it's like when people start, those thoughts typically, not for everyone, but for most people, they only happen because, they kind of see patterns, they kind of see results, they kind of see biases. Because, I work with candidates of all different backgrounds, and I see a lot of women when they want to negotiate, they're like, look, how do I go about it? I don't want to come across as, because sorry for, excuse my language, but women are seen as
they don't
bitchy.
Want to be seen as a bitch.
Yeah, they don't want to be seen as that.
Aggressive.
And unfortunately,
Absolutely.
Studies show that when they do negotiate, they're perceived a certain way. And it's like, you don't want that to happen. You want them to be like, look, I'm going to negotiate and, I'll be fair. I'll get it. Or if I don't, but, I see that happen a lot where they kind of see like, oh, XYZ is getting a promotion because they're, of a certain race or whatever. you don't want that to happen. So I think that's the, to add on to Nancy's point, like people, in a good organization, people just forget who they are. They're like, oh, I'm just a person in an organization that works with this title and I contribute.
This is a whole different
Yeah.
podcast because I
Yeah.
have a lot to say back to that. Okay,
I have to have another episode on that.
yeah, but I never forget I'm a woman, and I also, frankly, I think I've reached the point where you can absolutely think I'm aggressive. Go right ahead, and I really hope for women of younger generation that they're okay with that
Yeah.
because it's a self-limiting
It is.
self-judgment,
And it limits
and
the organization from getting, women to the position they deserve, because, you want to see like, hey, there's women on the board, there's women at the EVP, VP, SVP level, because again, when you have an organization, you want people to be able to look up to people and be able to reach out to people as mentors, because look, I, as like I see certain females, they want a female mentor because the experiences are going to be slightly different, and they want to be able to, there's a lot of nuance and subtleties, and I want people to be able to have access to stuff like that.
I agree. I've had some experiences just when you aren't mentored by a female, sometimes it's just a different experience.
Yeah, it's different. You want mentors of all different, right? My mentor is a female who's in her 40s, but then I have other mentors who are males, and each one gives a different perspective, different
Right.
things, and you want that. You want diversity in your mentors because each one has their own unique experiences, and then you can figure out what's right for you.
Right. I agree. Well, you guys, this was great. I think there was a lot of helpful information on office politics. You guys are fantastic. So
thank you, Corey.
I know you're welcome, and I'm so honored that you came onto my podcast. And I know you both are available on LinkedIn if anyone has something further they want to ask you. So thank you for coming.
I think we should introduce ourselves. We never really introduced ourselves.
So
Yeah, go ahead,
too.
do it real quick.
Nancy, go ahead.
Well, you all know my name. So I have a consulting firm, Political IQ, and we work with organizations to assess the political climate and how it differs with business. In addition, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcaster, I'm a writer. I'm happy to add you all to my mailing list if you reach out to me. I have an MBA from a fancy pants Ivy League school, but my early career was I ran a ballet company.
Oh, wow.
And my second career was touring factories in Central America and Asia to see UN health and safety violations and negotiate financial settlements for American clients. So leadership has been my third career for, as I said, over 20 years now. And I love it. I love the politics angle. So please, follow me. I'm at Halpern on Twitter. My YouTube channel is Get Political IQ, and come visit and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, my career is much shorter. It's still
Because
developing.
you're younger than I am.
So I used to be an actuary. I passed 2 exams, but I've been working on what I do now. I'm the founder of NoDegree.com, and I help people without college degrees find meaningful careers that pay well. And my real goal, my life's mission, is to sort of change the stigma attached to people without college degrees. And I'm the host of the No Degree podcast, where I interview people without college degrees and help them, have them share their story so other people can follow in their paths. And that's on nodegree.fm. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just send me a personalized request saying, hey, I listened to you and Nancy talk about political stuff on Corey's podcast. And yeah, I mean, thank you for this, Corey.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Corey. It's great fun.